From Lindenwood University in Belleville, Illinois, welcome to the second and final broadcast debate by the three candidates running for Congress in Illinois' 12th United States House District. The candidates are incumbent Democratic Congressman Bill Enyart of Belleville, State Representative Mike Bost, Republican of Murfreesboro, and Green Party candidate Paula Bradshaw of Carbondale. The candidates will be questioned by Molly Parker of the Southern Illinois newspaper, Jennifer Fuller of WSIU Radio, and Beth Hunsdorfer of the Belleville News Democrat. I'm Jack Titchener from WSIU Public Television. I'll be your moderator for tonight. We'll begin with a 2-minute opening statement from each candidate, the order of which was determined by a drawing by the candidates before the debate. The first opening statement will go to Representative Mike Bost.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you to the Belleville News Democrat, to the WSIU, and to the Southern Illinoisan and Lindenwood University for putting on this debate tonight. I look forward to the next hour and a half to have the opportunity to get the answers to many questions, I hope, to talk about the issues, to give the opportunity for you, the voters, to hear and understand what your options are next Tuesday. It has been a very long debate, very long campaign, and I hope that everyone will be informed. Thank you for participating in the process, and we look forward to the debate.
Paula Bradshaw.
It's time to stand up and fight for our country because we're under assault, even if they don't frame it like that. But what if it was terrorists poisoning our water supply? What if it was a foreign government who overthrew our Bill of Rights and spies on our every move? What if it was street criminals instead of banking criminals throwing Americans out of their houses? What if it was terrorists dumping oil into our oceans and rivers and blowing up our mountains? What if it was a foreign army kicking down American doors and killing dogs and people? We're told every day that America is most under threat from small groups of armed men thousands of miles away overseas. But in the meantime, right here at home, America is sinking into poverty and repression. And the actual country, the land and the water, the trees, the forests, the oceans, are being stripped for parts by a small group of people right here at home. Sorry. It's time to roll back. I'm running for Congress because I want to roll back the assaults on our people, on our land, air, and water, and on our Constitution. It's time to roll back the corporate occupation of Washington, D.C. It's time to stand up and fight, and that's what I'm doing.
Congressman Enyart.
Thank you, Jack, and I'd like to thank our host this evening for hosting this debate. I think it's very important so that the voters of Southern Illinois have the opportunity to hear the viewpoints of each of us. You know, since we're here in the Metro East, I want to talk a little bit about jobs. Jobs has been a very important topic of conversation in this debate. Here in the Metro East, indeed in the region, Scott Air Force Base is the largest employer. Scott Air Force Base is the largest employer south of Springfield. And, you know, when I ran 2 years ago, I committed that I would work to protect the jobs at Scott Air Force and protect Scott Air Force Base. What you have to do is consider the promises that are made by politicians and then compare those promises made with their performance. I like to think that I have performed on that promise. I know Scott Air Force Base very well. My military career started at Scott as a young enlisted airman in 1969. Later, after I went through school on the GI Bill and student loans, got commissioned. And 2 years ago, I retired as a Major General to run for Congress. I'm the only serving Major General in Congress. I sit on the House Armed Services Committee, where I have worked very diligently for Scott Air Force Base. 2 months ago, I was very proud to announce that 320 more jobs, 320 military positions are coming to Scott. Those are folks who are going to be buying cars here, eating meals here, and buying homes here. I was part of the Armed Services Committee that adopted an amendment that prohibits any BRAC consideration through 2017. We protected Scott for another 2 years. Now, also I serve on the Agriculture Committee, and because of the work that I've done on the Agriculture Committee, getting the first ag bill, first 5-year ag bill, farm bill done since 2008, I've been endorsed by the Illinois Farm Bureau. I'm the only person on this stage who has been endorsed by the Illinois Farm Bureau. I've been endorsed by both the Illinois Education Association and the Illinois Federation of Teachers for my support of education. I've been endorsed by both vets for my support of veterans and veterans issues. Thank you very much.
Time now for questions from our panel of journalists. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the question. The first question comes from Molly Parker for Congressman Enyart.
Congressman Enyart, many believe the current laws for controlling immigration into our country are inadequate, but Congress cannot agree on a bipartisan solution to address this issue. What solutions would you propose and support to fix this problem if elected to Congress? And at the same time, southern and southwestern Illinois have many immigrants working in agriculture, orchards, vineyards, and farms. What protections would you include in immigration reform for those workers and their families in our backyard?
Thank you, Molly. And I support the legislation that's been proposed and adopted by the Senate. I think that Speaker Boehner should, instead of refusing to bring it to the floor, Speaker Boehner should bring it to the floor. The Speaker of the House controls legislation which moves to the floor, and the Speaker is elected by the majority party, in this case the Republicans. So Speaker Boehner is refusing to bring that legislation to the floor because he doesn't want his members, his congressmen, to have to vote on that legislation before an election because it's a controversial issue. Well, you know what? When you're in Congress, you get paid to vote on controversial issues. You get paid to make decisions for our nation, and that's what we have to do. Now, I support the Senate legislation. And in fact, when I was serving as the Adjutant General for the Illinois National Guard, I was asked by Senator Durbin if I would write a letter in support of the DREAM Act, the act that he proposed. And I did that. Now, why did I do that? I did that because the provisions of the DREAM Act provide a path, and part of that path is that if you serve honorably in the United States military, then you can become a citizen. Now, I think that anyone who takes that oath to defend the Constitution of the United States, takes that oath to risk their life for our great nation, deserves to be a citizen of this great nation. That's why I did that. That's why I support the Senate bill, and will continue to do so.
Representative Bost.
Thank you. And let me say that first the thing we have to do is secure the border. Now, once we secure the border, then we must look for a way or pathway to citizenship for those that would qualify for that citizenship. Well, there are many people who, unfortunately, have been brought across the border at a very young age, have been educated in our schools, and now they're here and don't have a pathway. The pathway is not through a broad amnesty and just allowing them to have their citizenship, but they can get their citizenship exactly the same way that our forefathers did, those that immigrated to the area before. You know, it is the most important thing to secure the border. We had this problem, and it was discussed during the years of Ronald Reagan. The Congress then, he made a deal with the Congress that he would allow amnesty if they would secure the borders. He did, they didn't. That won't work, so we've got to secure the borders first.
Ms. Bradshaw.
Well, yes, Reagan did provide amnesty for immigrants back in 1986, which kind of temporarily solved the problem. But then in 1993, NAFTA was passed, and that drove millions and millions of especially Mexicans off of their land and to the United States. We went from 4 million undocumented Mexican immigrants in 1993 to 12 million. That's 8 million people who were driven across the border by the kind of economic hardship that NAFTA caused. We're used to knowing that NAFTA caused economic hardship for Americans, and it did, but it also caused great hardship for Canadians, actually, and Mexicans also. So what we need to do, number one, is repeal NAFTA. Number two, I do not want a big wall on our border. It would be like the Berlin Wall, but much, much bigger. It is a potent symbol of oppression, and it stops not only people migration, but also animal migration. So, and it's a big boondoggle in terms of money, too. What we need to do is have not a two-tiered labor system. We need to have labor laws that apply to all workers in the United States, and that would take away the incentive for people to hire undocumented immigrants and exploit them more than people who were born here in America. The other thing we need to do, like I said, is abolish NAFTA, which would which would make it so that people that haven't seen their families in 20 years can go back home and maybe have a better life there. The last thing I would say is stop the drug war in Mexico, which has killed 100,000 Mexicans and is causing also great hardship, and people are afraid and they're fleeing over the border. So this kind of thing, we need to ensure economic prosperity in Mexico. That will stop the push. Enforce our labor laws here, that would stop the pull, and I think the problem would largely be solved like that.
The next question is from Jennifer Fuller to Representative Bost.
Democratic U.S. Senator Dick Durbin recently talked about his support for the Export-Import Bank. This bank helps American companies sell their products overseas, including 7 in the 12th Congressional District to the tune of nearly $60 million. But its charter expires next year. Do you support the renewal of the Export-Import Bank? If so, why? And if not, how would you better finance exports for local companies?
Let me answer it this way. What I learned a long time ago in working in the Illinois General Assembly, if someone asks me a question that I'm not familiar with in great detail, I won't give an answer. Let me tell you that I know that working with my colleagues, that I can come up to work on solutions to try to figure out the problems. In that case, I don't know the answer to that question because I'm not familiar with the issue.
Paula Bradshaw.
I would not support the renewal of the Export-Import Bank because it is mostly just a big old taxpayer subsidy to large corporations. You know, they always talk about small businesses when they want to get taxpayer money out of us, and that's what they do with this. But 75% of it goes to large corporations like Boeing. So no, I would not support the renewal of the Export Bank, and I would say that if our companies can produce a product that other people in other countries want, then they can go ahead and buy it, and it's not up to the government to subsidize exports.
Congressman Enyart.
Thank you, Jack. I support the Export-Import Bank, and I support it because, first of all, it doesn't cost the U.S. government anything. In fact, it returns money. It returned $1 billion to the U.S. government last year. Now, I also support it because what it does is provide necessary financing for our exports. So, Paul is absolutely right. Boeing does use that. And you know what? Boeing has a large plant right over in St. Louis. Boeing has a smaller plant at Mid-America Airport. And we have lots of folks right here in the 12th Illinois who work at that Boeing plant. But it's not just large corporations. It also funds loans to foreign nations to buy our agricultural products. So, for example, the corn and the soybeans that we grow out here in these farm fields and ship down the Mississippi River to foreign nations, those are financed through the Export-Import Bank. Now, frankly, I find it very difficult to believe that Mr. Bost doesn't know anything about this issue. Kevin McCarthy, the majority leader of the Republican Party, is opposed to it and has spoken against it. And I suppose that's probably why it hasn't come up for a vote yet, because McCarthy is opposed to it, yet that bill would pass with Democratic votes and Republican votes because of its importance to the American economy. We can't not help finance our exports. And frankly, Mr. Bost just said that he doesn't know the answer to that question when it's been a topic of heated debate. But then again, he just said, he was quoted in the Chicago Tribune editorial board as saying he didn't know what was in the Senate immigration bill. He's been running for Congress for a year and a half. I would think that he would be up to speed on issues since he's been running against me for a year and a half. He should know about these important issues and be able to discuss them intelligently so the voters here would be able...
Thank you very much. Next question. Ladies and gentlemen, please, if you want to stay on time, I appreciate your interest in all of this. Beth Hunsdorfer's question goes next to Paula Bradshaw.
The U.S. Supreme Court recently found that corporations have the freedom to exercise their religious beliefs by exempting them from corporate contraceptive mandate and the Hobby Lobby decision, and the freedom of speech that exempts them from restricting independent political expenditures in the Citizens United case. Do you disagree or agree with the concept of corporate personhood?
I absolutely disagree with the concept of corporate personhood. You know, when this country was founded, corporate charters were limited in time and scope. The longest a corporate charter could be issued was 20 years. And over the last couple of centuries, corporations have grabbed more and more rights and none of the responsibilities of actual living, breathing American citizens. And now they're telling us they can have a religion? Yeah, have you ever seen a corporation in church? I mean, that is so absolutely ridiculous, I can't believe it. When they say corporations have the right of free speech, they're saying that they can buy speech. They can buy votes because a corporation has millions of dollars in which to influence election, whereas all you as American citizens have is maybe a letter to the editor and your one vote. So no, I do not think that corporations are persons. I would support the move to amend amendment that is being pushed where you say corporations are not people and money is not speech. And that would take away some of their rights. And actually, I would go back to the limited corporate charters that we had for the first 100 years or so of this country, because the corporations have run wild, and they're taking way too many rights away from ordinary American citizens.
Congressman Enyart.
Thank you, Jack. You know, the Hobby Lobby case, first of all, I think we need to make the distinction between for-profit corporations and religious institutions. Hobby Lobby is not a religious institution. Hobby Lobby is a for-profit corporation with tens of thousands of employees. It has thousands of stores and makes hundreds of millions of dollars. So I agree with Paula that corporation, that for-profit corporation, is not a person and does not have religious rights. Now, additionally, I don't believe that bosses have any right to step into a doctor's examining room and stand between a woman, or for that matter a man, and his or her doctor and instruct that doctor and that employee on what their medical treatment may or may not be. That is just not an appropriate role for an employer to take. And interestingly enough, in the Hobby Lobby case, Hobby Lobby provided birth control prior to the adoption of the ACA, the Affordable Health Care Act. So one must wonder what their motivation is in all of a sudden denying birth control on religious grounds when prior to the adoption of the ACA there was no such denial on the part of the bosses. So frankly, what we see here is an employer trying to step in, trying to tell a woman what health care she may or may not receive. And I will tell you that I don't believe bosses, corporate bosses, have any more business in a doctor's examining room than does the federal government or a politician.
Representative Bost.
I believe that corporations that are making up this United States are also individuals, that those individuals have rights, and the corporations have rights to establish what they believe. Because if you go, and we're talking about Hobby Lobby, but how about if we go down to the family farm, which is also incorporated? When we start telling them that, okay, well, you're incorporated, now you can't follow your own religious beliefs. I don't agree with it, and I'm just adamantly opposed.
Thank you very much. Representative Enyart will get the next question. Okay. Representative Enyart will get the next question from Jennifer Fuller.
With congressional approval ratings hovering around 13%, indications are that the country has given up on Congress to accomplish anything. Please name 2 members of Congress from the other party with whom you'd like to work on legislation if you are elected.
Thank you very much for that question, Jennifer. I will give you 2 names. In fact, I could easily give you 3 or 4 or 5, frankly. Well, let's start with John Shimkus. John has the district immediately to the east of us, and I serve with John Shimkus as co-chair of the Coal Caucus. It's virtually unheard of for a freshman congressman to serve as the chair of a caucus. But John and I work together. He is the Republican chair. I am the Democratic chair of that caucus. I currently have a bill pending with Congressman McKinley from West Virginia. And that bill, which is a bipartisan bill, would save the federal government money and allow us to put more money into infrastructure projects like highways, levees, locks and dams. And the way that bill would work, currently federal agencies, federal bureaucracies are under no obligation to follow the findings of an Inspector General report. Now, Inspector Generals, and of course I'm familiar with them in the military, but they exist in civilian agencies too. And what they do is they go in and inspect to determine whether there's waste or fraud or abuse, or if there are problems, or how to fix things, how to make the process work better. Well, Congressman McKinley and I discovered that there is no obligation for federal agencies to follow these findings. What happens? The report comes out, bureaucrat takes it, goes on the bottom shelf, sits there and gathers dust. So what our bill does is requires federal agencies to adopt findings of Inspector General reports, GAO reports, that save the government money, eliminate waste, eliminate fraud, eliminate abuse. Then the money that is saved from that is put into infrastructure projects. So we can fix our levees that we have problems with, so that we can fix our highways, so we don't have bridges collapsing into the Mississippi River.
Time, sir. Thank you very much. Representative Bost, your response.
Thank you. Because I've not served in the U.S. Congress, I can only explain to you things that I've known from working in the Illinois General Assembly. Being able to work across the aisle has been something that I've done very well, whether it's on fracking legislation, whether it's on telecommunications rewrite legislation. The list goes on and on between working with colleagues across the other side of the aisle. I've said so many times in the Illinois General Assembly, 90% of the people I work with on both sides of the aisle are trying to do the best job they possibly can to make things better. Unfortunately, in the state of Illinois, the other 10% keeps raising to the top and we send them to jail. But that being said, we have, and I have, had the opportunity to serve with many on the other side of the aisle. But to ask me which personalities I could work with on the other side of the aisle in the U.S. Congress, because I've not worked side by side with those personalities, that would take just a little bit of time. But I have been and will be good in that respect in being able to work across the other side of the aisle.
Paula Bradshaw.
Well, I can't think of any Republican currently serving that I could get along with, but Ron Paul, I think I could have got along fine with Ron Paul, who has the same kind of respect for the Bill of Rights and civil liberties that I do, and who also looks with disfavor upon the Imperial Project. As far as the other party, I guess I have an advantage here because both those parties are not mine. Alan Grayson, I think, who I also respect, and I think that I could work very well with Alan Grayson from Florida. And I like that you're talking about infrastructure because, of course, that's what the Green New Deal is all about, is updating, modernizing our infrastructure for the 21st century, getting us off of fossil fuels and onto renewable energy and sustainable transportation. That's a very, very important thing to do. It's also important to listen to scientists and their reports. So when a scientist comes out and says that they recommend that this is the best way to do something, I think that Congress and other policy makers should listen to them. If that's their area of expertise, and if they say, for instance, 97% of scientists warn us that global climate change will cause a great havoc to our planet and in our infrastructure, well, then I think we should pay attention to them and go, you know what, that's what you went to school for, that's what you study, we should listen to you. When the scientists come out and say half of all wildlife has been wiped off planet Earth in the last 40 years, I think we should have, that should be a wake-up call, and that Congress should quit bickering about, irrelevant things and start to save the ecosystem, the web of life of which we are a part. That's what I think our elected representatives should do. Look out for the good of the people and the planet and the other creatures that we share this planet with.
Our next question comes from Beth Hunsdorfer for Representative Bost.
Military surplus equipment was distributed to local law enforcement in Illinois, including 157 assault rifles, 83 pairs of night vision goggles, 82 pistols in St. Clair County, and a mine-resistant vehicle to Williamson County. After the Michael Brown shooting and the ensuing arrest in nearby Ferguson, how do you feel about the military program that provides weapons to local police departments?
I think that the ability, working as a firefighter and working with police in the local communities that I've done in the past, I think the opportunity to provide them with many things that they cannot afford is the right way to handle this. as we deal with sometimes, unfortunately, terrorism on the street, not in the case of what we have nearby, but just in the concerns that we have in local law enforcement. If we can use federal dollars to help in that manner, where those would then not be available to them, I'm all for allowing the opportunity for our local law enforcement to be able to receive those grants, those weapons.
Paula Bradshaw, please.
Well, the question is not whether they can afford tanks and assault weapons, but why on earth a local police department would need such things. As I pointed out in my opening, the American people are under assault. And when in the old days, or even in Carbondale, it still goes like this. If a warrant was to be served, the sheriff went and knocked on the door, and when the door opened, they handed the warrant over. Now, too many times you see 12 SWAT team members just go kick down the door and throw everyone on the floor, shoot the family dog, just to serve a warrant? At what point are we going to stop back and go, we're citizens, we're not criminals, we're not terrorists, we're American citizens and we have rights. And one of those rights is not to have our door broken down by a tank or a SWAT team. And one of those rights is to have the right to peacefully assemble and not be called a terrorist. So, no, I don't think that they should be getting rid of old military equipment by giving it to our local police forces. That can only end badly. I can't imagine a situation in which a tank could be put to good use on the streets of Belleville or Carbondale or Murfreesboro.
Representative Enyart.
Thank you, Jack. Beth, that's a great question. And, you know, just a couple of short years ago, we had a police officer here in Belleville who was part of a SWAT team, and there was a gentleman barricaded in a home with shotguns, and the police department had to get him out of there before someone was killed. And unfortunately, that police officer was very severely wounded when he was shot in the face. He nearly died, and in fact, he's blinded yet to this day because of that injury that he received. You know, like many questions that we have to deal with, I think it's a balancing test. And I think you have to look at what the equipment is and what the needs of the city or the municipality are. In terms of equipment like night vision goggles, I can certainly envision where folks might need night vision goggles. I can certainly see where a vehicle that would resist bullets would be very useful in a situation like that, where you have a gunman in a house barricaded who's threatening to kill himself or threatening to kill others, threatening to kill the police. So it's a balancing test. There's no clear right or wrong. Now, obviously, we don't need tanks. We don't need Tiananmen Square here in Belleville's City Square or Pinckneyville City Square or any other city square in our country. But there certainly is some military equipment. I could tell you, when I went to Afghanistan in 2008, they issued me the bulletproof gear and the glasses that are shatterproof, bulletproof. You can put a piece of shrapnel through them. And I can see where if that police officer had those glasses on, he might have saved his vision. So I think you have to balance what the equipment is and what the needs of the city are.
Next question is from Molly Parker for Paula Bradshaw.
The Southern Illinoisan has heard from a number of readers who are concerned about the volume of negative advertising that has consumed this race. Between the sound bites and hit pieces, the records of both Congressman Enyart and State Representative Mike Bost seem to have been taken out of context at times. Mr. Bost and Mr. Enyart, please explain both a time when you felt like your record was distorted and conversely, a time when you or your party leaders may have distorted your opponent's record. And Ms. Bradshaw, please tell us your thoughts on this negative advertising.
Well, I recommend my mother's advice. I remember when I was a kid, she told me that if she wasn't quite sure which candidate to vote for, she voted for the one with the fewest or the less advertising, because she figured that they had less money and they were probably not as corrupt. So I would recommend that. I would say take the negative ads from both candidates, take them to heart, and vote for the one that doesn't have any ads at all.
All right. Representative Enyart. Okay, everybody. Representative Enyart.
How could I argue with Paula on that? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, it would be awfully hard for me to pick an ad that distorts me, because I can tell you that virtually all of the attack ads against me distort my record. And, you know, Washington is very good at playing that political game, and I'll tell you both parties do it. Both parties will structure a bill so that maybe 90% of that bill is a great bill, and there'll be one little bomb in that bill, and then when you vote yay or nay on the bill, they're going to take that one little thing in there, and then they're going to distort it, and they're going to use it against you. And that's how these attack ads get made. Frankly, I don't watch a lot of attack ads because I watch WSIU when I'm in the South. I couldn't really pick an ad out for that attacks Congress, or that attacks the state record of Mr. Bost. You know, Mr. Bost has served for 20 years in the state legislature, so he's taken a lot of votes in there. But I can tell you that some of those votes, I don't think it's an attack ad if you clearly state what the vote was. Now, Mr. Bost voted against raising the minimum wage. Now, is that an attack to say Mr. Bost voted against raising the minimum wage? You know, that is truth, all right? Mr. Bost voted to raise his state legislative pay, taxpayer-funded state legislative pay, by nearly 9.6% after he voted not to raise the minimum wage. Now, is that an attack ad? You know, you're informing the public. So while some attack ads are really, really egregious, and you know, I love the bobblehead ones. You know, you would think that for what they're paying for those, they could hire a good graphic designer. But you know, let me tell you.
Time, sir. Thanks very much. Representative Bost, your response.
Can you repeat the question? Because I think we lost it somewhere in there.
I'll give you the cliff notes. Basically, we're looking for you to discuss the negative advertising that has consumed this race, and to talk about a situation where you've distorted your opponent's record, and where you feel like your record
most of them all have distorted my record. They really have. Now, let me tell you that there's one in particular, though, and let me tell you, I have to actually be shown them, because I'd like to say I'm watching WSIU all the time, but I'm actually on the campaign trail all the time trying to find out what's going on in the district. And but let me say this: the thing that probably bothers me the most is my wife humbled me tremendously. They've got a look-alike actor that runs out and throws things, and he runs up and throws things at little old ladies, and then children throw things at him, which people are really offended when you go door to door about that. But I said, you know, that kind of looks like me from behind. And she says, no, it doesn't. He doesn't have enough gray hair. So the ads are all going to be off here shortly. Nobody's happier about that than that. Well, yeah, all three of us up here, I'm sure, and all of you out there. I'm looking forward to having them off the air here shortly.
Next question is from Beth Hunsdorfer for Congressman Enyart.
Human embryonic stem cells are master cells able to develop into almost any cell in the human body. There has been research to explore whether stem cells can be used to treat spinal cord injury, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes, and other diseases or conditions. Where do you stand on federal funding for stem cell research?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I think that's a settled issue, and I think that stem cell research has proven its worth. The Bush administration approved stem cell research, and as far as I can tell, it's a settled issue, and they're certainly doing it at most major research medical institutions in the nation. And I think that that research, following the guidelines as promulgated by the Bush administration, should continue.
Representative Bost.
Thank you, but Jack. The embryonic research, I don't agree with. Stem cell research, I agree with. Stem cell research not taken from embryonic cells actually shows more effect of positive medical treatments and those things that can be done. It is a case where this has been drug into a situation that is argued over, but the reality is that Stem cell research doesn't just have to be with embryonic. I do support non-embryonic stem cell research and the funding of that, but not embryonic.
Paula Bradshaw.
I also support stem cell research. I support basic scientific research. I think that's a very good thing if we're going to progress as humans, and it would be really good to fix some of these chronic diseases. As far as federal funding, I do think that federal funding should be used for basic scientific research, like I said, but then I don't know if it should just be turned over to profit-making institutions for them to profit from something that federal funds paid for. I think that we should remember that if there are advances made by federal funds, then the people of the United States paid for those advances, and the people of the United States should benefit from them without having to pay through the nose for some profit-making discovery that comes from them. In other words, if you have Parkinson's and you've been paying federal taxes and they've come up with a cure for Parkinson's, should you have to then pay $200,000 for that cure if your taxes went to fund the research? I don't think so. I think that federal funds should be used for the good of all the people, and scientific research should be used for the good of all the people.
Our next question is from Molly Parker to Representative Mike Bost.
Recently, the Southern Illinoisan reported on an incident of bullying at Anna Jonesboro High School in which a football player's hands were tied up behind his back and his teammates forced him under a shower. The year prior, a 15-year-old committed suicide in Carterville after his father says that young man was bullied by his classmates. Many members of Congress have become increasingly concerned about what can be done. Should Congress address this issue, and if so, what way?
Let me tell you that we do deal with it in the state. I do not believe that Congress should deal with this. I believe that the state law should deal with it. I believe our local school boards should deal with it under the guidance of state law. No one wants to see bullying occur. It is a terrible, terrible thing. And we've got to make sure that our local schools are encouraged on how to deal with them, are educated and trained on how to deal with bullying, how to stop it in our schools, and get parents involved, and do that at the local level. But there are some of these things that maybe at the national level, I don't agree that the national level should come in with some kind of oversight whenever the state and local can do it much better.
Paula Bradshaw.
I'm agreeing with you here, Mike. Wow. I'm not quite sure what Congress could do to stop bullying in the schools. We all agree that bullying in the schools is wrong, and we need to teach our children to treat each other with kindness and respect. I'm not quite sure what has been proposed for Congress to do about it. I would have to, when I get to Congress and they come up with a good idea, I'll think about it then. But until then, I'm going to say that this is something that parents should teach their children from a very young age, sharing and caring. It should be on TV, on little kid programs. It should be in the schools. And it shouldn't be tolerated in the schools at all. When they see a child being bullied, teachers should step in and model some correct behavior for the younger people, the children.
Representative Enyart, your response?
Thank you, Jack. I'll tell you, my daughter-in-law is an 8th grade teacher at MG School right here in Belleville. In fact, she's out in the audience. And my mother-in-law taught the 3rd grade for 30 years at Jerome School in Cahokia. And I think Hillary Clinton really put it very well when she said it takes a village to raise a child. Now, I think what she meant by that is when you take a village to raise a child, it takes a team effort. It takes a lot of folks because schools can't do it alone. Parents can't do it alone because the kids are in school. So I think what we need to do is we need to have a teamwork. And I think there is an appropriate role for the federal government in terms of providing resources to schools, providing resources to education, because educating our children is the most important thing we do, educating that next generation. Now, I can tell you that the state legislature, unfortunately, during the 20 years Mr. Bost has been serving in it, has passed unfunded mandate after unfunded mandate That is, they put requirements on schools and requirements on teachers and requirements on administrators without paying for it. So who pays for it? Well, it comes out of the music program. It comes out of the counseling programs. It comes out of the PE programs. It comes out of local property tax dollars when the state legislature passes an unfunded mandate. So we can't afford to have any more unfunded mandates. What we need to do is work together as a team with the federal government, state and local government. We need to provide resources for mental health counseling. We need to provide training for teachers, for faculty and staff, so that we don't have these instances of bullying and these instances of suicides or these incidents of young people who take a gun and shoot down their classmates. That's what we have to do.
Jennifer Fuller has a question which goes to Paula Bradshaw this time.
When we last met for a debate, the Ebola crisis had just begun to touch the lives of people living in the United States. Now several states are implementing quarantines and many are calling for a travel ban. What are your ideas for keeping Ebola out of this country while also meeting the humanitarian needs of people around the world?
Well, I haven't really changed my opinion that much. I mean, I know how to stop the spread of disease, and that is keep the person that's infected away from people who are healthy. Now, we can do it in a humanitarian way. Making a nurse live in a tent outside of a hospital is not exactly humane, and I think that our country can do a little bit better than that. But I think that, you know, if you have an isolated outbreak in a faraway country that is causing destruction, the exact wrong thing to do is what our ruling overlords seem to be calling for, which is sending people from all over the world to that hotspot, to that source of infection for 2 weeks, and then sending them back to their home countries. How does that make any sense? You know, if you're going to do that, then part of that 2 weeks is going to have to be, I would think, a 3-week period in which they get to chill out at home and not go to work and you know, possibly infect their coworkers and other people. And if that is just too hard of a thing to do, then quit with the scaremongering. You know, we can't have it both ways. One is, oh, Ebola's going to get you. You're all going to die. You're all going to die. Oh, but we're not going to stop people from traveling because that would be oppressive. Make up your mind. Either it's a horrible disease that needs to be contained, or it can be contained without a travel ban. But you can't have it both ways.
Representative Enyart.
Thank you, Jack. You know, I think here we have an example of where politicians are overriding the best judgment of scientists. And I don't think that there's a place for politicians to step into this. I think what we have to do is rely on the epidemiologists, the folks who study this, who know what the proper response is. You know, if you shut down all the flights, then somebody from Liberia is just going to go to Barcelona or go to Rome and then fly to the U.S., and we don't have any way of tracking those folks. We have a worldwide network. And what instead we need to do is put the money into research and development to contain these types of epidemics. And unfortunately, the sequester budget, which was put through by the Republican-controlled Congress, slashes CDC and NIH funding by 10%. And the Paul Ryan budget, which I voted against, is even worse because it cuts CDC, Center for Disease Control, and the National Institute of Health, slashes it by 24% over 10 years. Now, if we have these types of epidemics, is it the right thing to do to slash public health funding by those kind of levels? You know, I have a little bit of experience in this area because when I commanded the Guard, we had one of our last flu epidemics, and I was in charge of ensuring that the flu vaccines which came into the state were then warehoused and then distributed through the Department of Public Health and through IEMA, and we were in charge of doing that. And we relied on the scientists to tell us when we needed to get the vaccine, who we needed to get it to, where it needed to go. Once again, you have a situation where you have people with no expertise, but who are doing something simply because they think there's a political need to do it. Let's rely on the scientists at the CDC and the NIH who study these sorts of things and know what they're doing instead of a political figure.
Representative Bost.
Thank you, Jack. First off, let me tell you, the President was up today and sending a medical delegation over. The concern that I have, and I'm for that, to try to deal with it and fight the battle there. The problem is we don't know exactly what his plans are on controlling the influx back and forth. And I do believe a travel ban would be appropriate. It is within his power, and that's what I said when we first asked about this during the last debate. I think that it is important to bring up that the CDC and actually the Republican budget, because I did pay attention to that, and the other budgets that were presented, actually increased what the President asked for. He was cutting the CDC even more than that. So I think that we need to be honest about what we're dealing with here. Was a reduction? Yes, it was. But the reality is you have to look at the whole budget. And when we're talking about this, because that was a specific question, we must make sure that we fight that battle in that country and try to keep our borders as secure as possible. We help. We send humanitarian help. That's all. I was for with the President when he was talking to do that for today. But we've got to make sure that we do control the influx back in.
Our next question is from Molly Parker to Congressman Enyart.
The 12th Congressional District encompasses both rural and urban areas, each with their own benefits and challenges. When it comes to bridging the gap, what ideas do you have to make sure basic services like education and health care are equally distributed given the district's geographic size and populations?
You know, Molly, that's a great question. And this congressional district is the size of the state of Connecticut. It's 12 counties. It's 4 hours by car from Godfrey on the north to Carroll on the south, and then you have to come back up to Mount Vernon. So we really have, when I ran for office 2 years ago, I said we had two economies here. We had the Metro East economy and we had the rural economy. And you know what? I was wrong. I learned something over the last 21 months. I think I learned a lot of things. But the thing I learned about the economy is we've got several different economies in this region. We have the Metro East economy, which is very heavily influenced by Scott Air Force Base. It, of course, is influenced by the St. Louis metropolitan area. We've got a lot of commuters. We have folks who work at Boeing. We have folks who work at all of the different corporations in St. Louis, as well as in the heavy industrial corridor along the Mississippi River. Now, when you go over to the Mount Vernon Interstate 57 corridor from Mount Vernon down through West Frankfort, Benton to Marion, you see, particularly in the Mount Vernon area, a very dynamic economy. I was over there 2 weeks ago, and Mayor Mary Jane Chesley was showing me the front page of the Mount Vernon paper, where unemployment in Mount Vernon is down 2% over a year ago. The economy in Mount Vernon is booming. And why is it booming? Because of infrastructure. They have 4 Class A railroads. They have 2 interstate highways. They have a community college, Rend Lake, which is working with the employers there to get skilled training to would-be employees. So with that infrastructure, that area is booming. But when you look at other areas of the 12th Congressional District, you have a much different economy. You have state facilities that have closed. You have prisons that have closed. You have Southern Illinois University, because of cuts in the state budget overseen by Mr. Bost, where there are 500 vacancies at SIU Carbondale.
All right. Representative Bost, your turn.
One thing to help with this is quite often we dealt in the state of Illinois with the concerns that we deal with as far as what eye doctors can do and what ophthalmologists can do, and these turf battles. And we dealt with those to the best we can, because you have to understand when you start talking about medical needs being provided, sometimes you just don't have the docs. But now if you want to really bring the docs, and if you want to really bring things up, you start providing jobs. And how do you do that? You once again start walking away or stepping away from the overburdensome regulation on coal. We encourage the safe fracking practices that were passed in the state of Illinois. You put people to work. As the congressman said, you don't have quite the problems that you do up in this area where the jobs are booming. If you want the jobs to boom, do you want infrastructure? Sure. But you've got to be able to, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Well, I'm telling you that we'll be able to put the infrastructure in place when we start all those jobs up down there. That will cure many of the problems that you were talking about.
Paula Bradshaw.
Yeah, taking regulations off coal and fracking, that'll make the healthcare business boom. Yeah. I would like to say that these are two different things, really. The health, providing health for the people of Southern Illinois, it's just a matter of population. It doesn't matter if you're scattered or if you're concise. If you have a certain amount of clinics for a certain amount of people, then you would have more in the Metro East where people are more densely populated and fewer in the more rural areas, but you would still have, say, a clinic for every 20,000 people or something like that. And that should be part of the Medicare for All improved healthcare system that I advocate as part of my platform. Education is more heavily funded right now by state and property taxes, so we do see vast inequalities in the qualities of our education system. I would advocate that that be part of the Green New Deal, that education be funded more by the federal government to make up for the shortfalls of people who are too poor to pay for good schools in rural districts, but their kids still deserve, you know, the music, the art, the physical education, the kind of things that make school fun and pleasant for kids and make them a more rounded human being. I think that the federal government should step in for that and start helping to make up for the property tax shortfall of our poor districts. But like I said, in terms of health, it should be per population.
Next question is to Representative Bost from Jennifer Fuller.
Despite cuts to food stamps, Congressman Enyart voted in favor of a farm bill. Representative Bost, a majority of Republicans also voted for that bill. The Democrats remain split on the issue. Can you talk about the necessity of a farm bill for this district and how you would have voted on that specific legislation?
Well, let me tell you that it is the one piece of legislation, unfortunately, that has made it through the Senate of any substance. There was arguments back and forth, and it wasn't really about the farm bill is vitally important. We have to pass it. We have to make sure, especially with with agriculture being in this area. I have worked with farmers, and actually I've been endorsed by the Farm Bureau every year as state representative. The endorsement that comes from the Farm Bureau, you have to actually have a voting record to get that endorsement. So that's kind of why the other two on the stage don't have that endorsement. But whenever working with agriculture, you've got to make sure that this bill, as it was moved forward, there were many issues that came up with the first bill that the congressman didn't vote for in the first bill. But he said there were things he wanted to change. But he never offered one amendment. But what was unique about this bill was actually one bill that you could not only offer amendment in committee, but you could offer it on the floor. You could offer it at any time. But yet no amendment was offered. I believe that the important thing is that when you're working on this Farm Bill, which will come up again in 5 years, when you're working on that, you need to make sure you keep in constant contact with the locals to make sure that you can communicate their ideas and beliefs. Now, when we started talking about the issues as far as there were about 3 different levels of where food stamps went. I didn't have to deal with the bill. I believe that we probably should have actually made some sensible reductions a little bit greater than what they did, to tell you the truth.
Paula Bradshaw's response is next.
Well, I kind of go along with New Deal farm policies more than the newer farm bills that have come up in the last couple decades. I think that back then people realized that issues of farmland and hunger were related, and they realized that a bad harvest could lead to times of famine. And so they did things like they tried to stop the farmers that were losing their land back in the 30s by putting in farm parity programs where the farmer was guaranteed the price that it cost to raise the crop and a little bit of profit in order to keep them in business. And I agree with that. Now, ever since the 70s, that has been cut into, and if you'll recall, especially in the 80s when the interest rates went up, hundreds of thousands of American farmers lost their lands and their farms. And I consider that a tragedy. And this last farm bill not only cut food stamps, which should be one of the most basic things of farm policy is to feed the actual people of a country. So they cut the food stamps, which were an elegant way to distribute food in a non-bureaucratic way. Just, people were given stamps instead of rations and allowed to spend it on whatever they wanted. But the other thing they did was increase insurance. It's kind of like this last farm bill was Obamacare for farmers, because what it did was we, the taxpayers, are now paying insurance companies to insure farmers. And they're forgetting that the point of farming is to produce food. And like 2 years ago, we had that drought. It's nice that the farmers got insurance money, but how many years can we go like that before we start going hungry? So I think we should go back to the parity programs. I think that we should go back to protecting wetlands and marginal lands by paying farmers for set-asides. I think we should go back to storing food for times of famine, which we gave up in the 90s. And the other thing
Thank you very much. Congressman Enyart, your comment.
Well, thank you. First of all, I have to correct something Mr. Bost said. Mr. Bost said I did not vote for the first farm bill. He is absolutely incorrect in making that assertion. He is also incorrect in asserting that I had no role in the farm bill. Let me just tell you that my endorsement with the Illinois Farm Bureau speaks volumes about my record on agricultural issues. So perhaps Mr. Bost should take a look at that. Now, let me tell you why the Farm Bill failed the first time. The Tea Party folks, the ultra-right of the Republican Party, wanted $40 billion cut from food stamps. The left wing of the Democratic Party did not want any cuts whatsoever. Well, there were a lot of compromises made, and we worked very hard to try and reach something that people could agree on. And Republican Chairman Frank Lucas and Democratic Ranking Member Colin Peterson crafted, with my help and the help of Rodney Davis and some other folks, crafted a very delicately balanced bill that was submitted. That bill failed because the far right and the far left, amazingly enough, voted together to shoot the bill down because they didn't think, far right thought there wasn't enough cuts, far left thought there were too many cuts, so it failed. Well, the Senate then came up with a bill. And the bill, the far right wanted $40 billion in cuts. $40 billion in cuts. The left wing wanted zero. We crafted a bill that was somewhere around $20 billion in cuts over 10 years, aimed at preventing a disaster to people. But where we wound up after negotiations between the Senate and the House was a $4 billion cut. So I think what people need to pay attention to is the fact that because of my work on agricultural issues, because of my work on the Farm Bill, because of my work on ethanol, and because of my work...
Time, sir. Thank you very much. Beth Hunsdorfer now has a question for Paula Bradshaw to start the next round.
This question is from Belleville News Democrat reader Sharon Zajac. Do you understand why the American public is so disgusted with Congress? Approval ratings hover around 13%. That's probably lower than reporters. Without blaming the other side, would you give your specific reasons why the public is so angry and disgusted with our political leadership?
I think that the American people expect more from their government. I think that, just like with the Farm Bill, we've gone so far from what farming is about. We've gone really far from what government is about. We, the people of the United States, were forming a perfect union in order to provide for the common welfare and the common defense and to make a better place for all of us. And this Congress and the Congress in the last 30 years, probably, no, 20 years, has not been doing that. It seems like if there's a bill, if there's money to be spent for war or repression or selling tanks to the police, then the Congress is all for it. And I don't think that most American citizens think that war and repression is exactly the only use for government. It should be used for the betterment of all the people. It should be used to provide an infrastructure so that our country functions better. It should be used to, like we talked about earlier, provide infrastructure such as renewable energy and sustainable transportation, to provide for scientific research, to provide for health and education. And all we see here is cuts. We see cuts to food stamps. We see cuts to education. Obamacare is really a cut to the health care profession. It is a giveaway to the insurance companies and a cut in actual health care. So that is what we've seen from the Congress, and that is why I think that people don't like the Congress that they have. And they say they're tired of the two parties, too. But here's a third party. This is your big chance. If you're tired of the two parties just bickering about nothing and only standing together when it comes time to harm the American public, well, then try something new. Try some people with new ideas, with a vision for the future that involves helping everybody in this country and preserving our environment for future generations.
Congressman Enyart.
Thank you, Jack. Well, you know, I just finished reading a really great book, Thomas Jefferson, The Art of Power, by I think it's by Joel Meacham, won a Pulitzer. And, you know, today when we look back on it, we look at Thomas Jefferson as a great hero, an icon of the founding fathers. Thomas Jefferson was hated by nearly half the people in the United States, and was slandered and vilified. And, you know, politics in our country has always been a bit of a blood sport. Now, so we're in many ways still having a lot of the same arguments, whether we want to have centralized power or decentralized power, and so a lot of those same arguments are going on. But I think one of the problems that people get really aggravated about is Congress's failure to pass a budget. And that's why I've sponsored the No Budget, No Pay Act. Now, the No Budget, No Pay Act says that if Congress doesn't pass a budget on time, and that is our one constitutional requirement, we're supposed to pass the budget. Well, if we don't pass the budget, we don't get paid. You know, if you don't, Beth, if you don't show up for work, absent being on vacation or something, you're not going to get paid, are you? So I think that's a reasonable thing, and that's why I have co-sponsored that bill and intend to vote for that bill. I think another reason that there is so much discord is because the economy virtually collapsed in 2008. It collapsed because, guess what? We did away with so many regulations, so many of those burdensome regulations that Mr. Bost is always talking about. We eased up the regulations on the banking industry, on the mortgage industry, and guess what? Greed ran wild. The banking industry, the housing industry nearly collapsed. We were shedding 1 million jobs a month in 2008, 1 million jobs a month. Congress had to step in and bail out GM. Had we not done that, the automobile industry would have collapsed. So I think it was Bill Clinton who said, it's all about the economy.
Time, sir. Thanks very much. Representative Bost.
Thank you, Jack. And let me explain. I think there's two reasons why. One is that the general public sees that there is a partisan bickering that is going on. They blame the House, but the reality is 360 bills have been passed from the House into the Senate in a bipartisan manner, a majority of those. And yet it's held up there, and that's what you hear in the media, the frustration that people feel. But I think there's a second reason. The second reason has to do with the fact that most of the constituents feel like that Congress is out of touch. They go off to the Beltway, and they get tied up in the Beltway, and they no longer listen or take the time to go out and talk to the individuals and figure out, where are your ideas on this? How do I advance those ideas? Help me work together to try to move forward with these causes. You know, the best example of that is probably Eric Cantor. He was probably rising to the Republican leadership, but the reality is he forgot his district, and the voters sent him a clear message. And those voters sent him a clear message, and they kept him home. So maybe that's what the voters need to do, is whenever someone isn't communicating, when they aren't coming out and they aren't talking to you and they aren't touching base with you and figuring out what we need to do, maybe you ought to keep them home.
Our next question is from Jennifer Fuller for Representative Enyart.
Several states around the country, including in Illinois, have legalized marijuana, whether it be for medical use or recreational purposes. Yet federal law still prohibits its use. What is your stance on a federal legalization of marijuana?
Well, I think clearly that marijuana should be decriminalized. We have far too many people sitting in prison on extended terms, on very lengthy terms. It costs us about $50,000 a year to keep someone in prison. And frankly, with what we have seen happening across the nation, it doesn't make any sense at all to spend the billions and billions of dollars that we spend to incarcerate people for marijuana offenses. I think that marijuana is a health care issue. I think that smoking marijuana is like smoking cigarettes. It's bad for your health. It can't possibly be good for you. But does it deserve the criminal penalties that currently are assessed against it? No, I don't think so. So I think it should be decriminalized. And I want to yield 10 seconds now to my opponent, Mr. Bost, and I want to ask him, Mr. Bost, do you know how many weeks a year a congressman is required to be in Washington, D.C. to cast votes? 10 seconds. How many weeks?
I didn't know the debate went this way,
Well,
but thank you for asking.
Your thoughts on it? Okay.
I'm hoping to find out next year.
All right.
All right.
Thanks
Once
very
again,
much.
Mr. Bost. Once again, Mr. Bost accuses me of being out of touch. Let me explain to you, Mr. Bost. When you get elected to Congress, and you've been running for a year and a half now, so I would think you'd know this, I had to spend 34 weeks in Congress, and then when the Republicans shut down the government last October, a year ago, I had to spend an extra 2 weeks in Washington, D.C., so I couldn't come back here. But I flew home every weekend. I did Congress on Your Corner, and we maintain social media. We have 7 offices.
Right. Time's
I
up.
opened 2 new offices
Time's
since
up.
I have served in Congress, and I resent.
Okay. All right, everybody. Paula Bradshaw's next, then Representative Bost.
Oh, well, not only do I think marijuana should be legalized, I think hemp should be legalized also, because that would be quite a boon to small farmers in Illinois. Hemp is a plant that can be used for many, many purposes. It was grown in this country from, actually the Declaration of Independence was written on hemp paper, and it was grown in this country until the 50s, at which point big businessmen pushed Congress to make it illegal. And I think that I kind of forgot to say that, why people don't look down on Congress, or why they look down on Congress. Part of it is because there's 100,000 lobbyists in Congress, and our congressmen tend to listen to them more than the people back home. So I think that's another reason why people don't appreciate Congress. In terms of marijuana not having any medical benefits, it does. It can be used for glaucoma, it can be used for cancer, and it can be used for the symptoms of multiple sclerosis. So all of these things and more, marijuana is a useful drug for. So yes, I do think marijuana should be legalized, and hemp, as I said. And I think that it would be a big boon to the rural area of Illinois if we had that legalization.
Representative Bost, your turn.
Well, let me tell you that in the state of Illinois, I did not support even the medical use of marijuana, and the reason being is because if you remember, up until this last General Assembly, we always had a pharmacist that was a member of Congress, or of the representatives in either the House or the Senate, and each one of them gave testimony to drugs that were available that could do the exact same thing. And with the problems that existed in the other states and the concerns that I've had with everything from the growing to the distributing, and it was not a good choice, I don't think, for the state of Illinois. It is the law of the state of Illinois now. The question is, would I support something to change that position in D.C.? And the answer is no, I would not. And I'm glad that we can stay focused on the issues at hand.
Our next question is from Beth Hunsdorfer for Representative Bost to start the next round.
Some people believe global warming is a serious threat to our society, economy, and socially and politically, and action must be taken to immediately mitigate the effects. Others believe global warming is a myth, and any actions in response to it would be harmful to the economy and society as a whole. Where do you stand on global warming?
First off, let me tell you that I believe we have to be good stewards of all of our natural resources. But I also don't think we should starve our children to death by keeping ourselves from having the opportunity to provide good-paying jobs here in our state. As we move forward, and when you talk to the scientists, the level at which global warming will occur or not occur, some say it is fact, some say it isn't, and the actual the name of it has now been changed to climate change, not just global warming, because the numbers aren't matching up with what the claims that were made. So, but with those who do study it and say it's going to occur so many years out, and they're very far out into the future. Right now, I'm more concerned about the people being able to have the opportunity to work and continue to work, not only here, but all across the nation. And that we need to make sure that we are able to compete in a worldwide market. We also need to make sure, and I'm all for this, that we need to look to the future for better opportunities to provide energy from solar, from wind. But until we can catch up with that, we must use our natural resources the way they are now.
Congressman Enyart.
Thank you, Jack. I don't think there's any serious scientific dispute that climate change is happening. All you have to do is take a look at the photographs taken from space of the polar ice caps, and you can clearly see, they're now talking about trade routes being open across what was the polar ice cap across the north of Canada. And today, Russia and Canada and the U.S. With Alaska are all scrambling to figure out how we're going to handle this in terms of what the various national rights are for shipping and so on. So there is no serious dispute that it in fact is happening. And 99% of all climatologists, scientists who study the climate agree that it is in fact happening. So I don't see how anyone can deny that or claim that it's not happening. Now, clearly climate change is cyclical. Dinosaurs once roamed the earth. Then we had glaciers, and if you go up to Wisconsin, you'll see the glacier moraines. And so there has always been an ebb and a flow of climate change in the world. I think that we need to do the research and development to get carbon out of our fossil fuel products. And there's a couple of reasons we need to do that. In spite of what Mr. Bost says about burdensome regulations, here in Illinois, we mine more coal today than we did 10 years ago. But where does that coal go? Much of it gets shipped overseas to places like Turkey, Pakistan, India, where it is burned in countries that have virtually no pollution control. So what we need to do is invest at Southern Illinois University Coal Research Center, among other places, in the research and development so that we can control it at a cost that we can export to other nations.
Thanks very much. Paula Bradshaw, your thoughts?
I also agree that climate change is real and it's happening now. The warmest parts of the globe are in the North Pole, the polar regions of the north part of the globe, and you can see the polar bears drowning and the walruses beaching themselves, and I think that is a tragedy that we should consider in our quest for a better life. Now, it is true that 97% of the climate scientists agree that that there's human causes for climate change, and just a plucky little band of oil oligarchs disagree with them and have managed to fund a couple of scientists to say so. In terms of the Earth, the planet Earth, yes, it has gone from overheating to overcooling, but we evolved in the Holocene era. We've only had agriculture for 10,000 years, and we have to make sure that our temperatures stay within that which we evolved in, because, yeah, you worry about starving children. If you can't grow food, children are going to starve, and so is everyone else. If you have droughts the way we did in southern Illinois, or in the Midwest 2 years ago, they had droughts in Australia that ruined their crops. They had drought in Russia and a heat wave in Russia that ruined their crops. The crops can't pollinate above a certain temperature, and so you have to keep in mind that we have to keep our temperature within the temperature in which we evolved, and we have to get off fossil fuels right now. And there's really no downside to getting off of fossil fuels. If the whole thing was a hoax, like the Koch brothers say, so what? So we get off fossil fuels. We're no longer dependent on the Middle East for oil. We no longer have to destroy our mountains and our land for coal. We switch to renewable energy that doesn't release mercury and doesn't acidify the oceans. What's the problem?
Our last question comes from Molly Parker, first to Congressman Enyart, and to stay on time, a 1-minute response in this round. Molly.
The U.S. Census Bureau found in 2008 that women's median annual earnings were 77.5% of the male median. Research found that women earn less than their male colleagues just 1 year out of college, but the pay gap widens 10 years post-graduation. How do you account for the pay gap between male and female workers? Do you feel this disparity needs to be addressed, and if so, how?
I do think it needs to be addressed, and Molly, let me tell you that I support equal pay for equal work. I think that if a woman is doing the same job as a man, she should be paid the same. And I would tell you that in my nearly 36 years in the military, if you were a PFC, you got paid a PFC's rate, whether you were a man or a woman. If you were a colonel, you got paid as a colonel, whether you were a man or a woman. I think that when women are doing the same work as a man, there's absolutely no reason that they should be paid any less than that. And frankly, I think that the Lilly Ledbetter Act was an act that needed to be passed. Employers cannot be allowed to discriminate against women any more than employers, large corporate, for-profit corporations should be allowed to discriminate against women in their health care. And, my opponent talks all the time about repealing the ACA. One of the things the ACA does is ends discrimination against women in health care insurance.
Got to stop you there. Representative Bost.
Thank you. Thank you, Jack, and I can give you a quick answer. I believe in equal pay for everyone. If you're doing the same work, then you should be paid the same. My wife, my daughters, my granddaughters, I've watched my wife work at a very difficult job over the years. She does a great job of running a small business. And I'm going to tell you, it's a business that is discriminated against. And the reason that is she's a hairdresser. And what you'll find is that quite often male hairdressers make more money. And that's not right. But it's really wild that that's the case, and I don't think it's right. And we should make sure that we do everything to be sure that we get equal pay for equal work.
Paula Bradshaw.
Well, I of course, believe in equal pay for equal work. But I think that the wider problem is that the income levels of all American workers have been falling. Now, in the last 5 years, 99% of the income gains made in this country went to the top 1% of Americans. So clearly, everyone in the bottom 99% is losing out in that state. I believe in a living wage for everybody, and I realize that 40% of American citizens right now live at or near poverty, and that is a disgrace. So we need to raise wages for everybody. There's no reason people should be working full-time and not making enough to pay the rent and buy food and pay for necessities of life.
Time now to move to closing statements. Representative Bost will have the first closing statement.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you for all the sponsors that put these debates on. And I think that this entire race has been about something that, as far as I'm concerned, Is the nation headed in the direction that you like? I'd say that most of you say no. And unfortunately, as we've tried to deal with the issues, there has been those ads out there that not focusing on the issue, but focusing on sidebar. And let me tell you this. I've served the constituents of the 115th District with honor, being constantly in contact with them, listening to them, and voting for them in the state of Illinois. I'm asking now to take that and go to Washington, D.C. Let me tell you, there's one other thing I want to say, because this is our last debate. I want to thank my wife for putting up with this. I want to thank my children for putting up with some things that just weren't right. But I'm going to tell you this. I'm willing to put myself out here to ask for your vote because I want things better for my 9 grandchildren, and I hope you want it better for yours. I'm asking for your vote this coming Tuesday. Thank you for the opportunity to be up here.
Thank you. Paula Bradshaw's next.
Well, if there's one thing that's certain in life, it's that things do change, and we do want them to change for the better. But is that what's going to happen? If you look at 200 years ago, 1814, Belleville was just beginning, and most of southern Illinois was populated by the First Nation peoples. 100 years ago, 1914, almost all those natives were gone, and so was the original forest. And southern Illinoisans struggled to make a living at mining and farming. Then the 30s came, and the New Deal came, and we got the Shawnee National Forest and all those trees planted. We got Social Security, and we got Shawnee National Forest, Social Security, and other good things that we needed. But now those things in 2014 are under attack, and Southern Illinoisans are again struggling to make a living. And we're being told that we have to go back to mining or go to fracking or build more prisons in order for people to make a living. So where will we be in 100 years? Shouldn't we have some kind of say in our future? Where there is no vision, the people perish. And if we continue to let the 1% choose our future with their relentless drive for profit and nothing else, the future is very grim. Preachers, poets, and prophets tell us that there's more to life than the struggle for money. But politicians usually tell you that all that counts in life is to grow the economy. Robert F. Kennedy pointed out that the GDP goes up with every car crash. The GDP goes up with every war, with every newly diagnosed case of cancer. But the GDP doesn't count the strength of our marriages or the happiness of our children or the good times we have with friends. If you clear-cut a forest, there's profit to be made in there. But if you just take a hike through an intact forest, there's no profit. So, things like taking a drink from a clear mountain spring, listening to birds sing or babies giggle, all of these things don't make any money, but they're what makes life worth living. I ask that you vote for a good future, a future in which happiness and health is taken into consideration when we make our choices for the future, and that would be a green future, and I hope that you can vote for a green prosperity and not for a continued destruction of this beautiful place in which we live.
Congressman Enyart.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Jack. You know, the three folks up here are applying for a job, and you have a vote in which one of us will receive that job. And I think what you need to think about are the promises that are made and the promises and whether or not promises are kept. I promised when I was elected 2 years ago that I would work to preserve Scott Air Force Base. I have done that. I sit on the House Armed Services Committee, which is a difficult assignment to get. I am the only two-star general serving in Congress. I was able to announce 2 short months ago, 320 new jobs are coming to Scott. I'm working on getting the National Geospatial Agency with 1,800 jobs here at Scott. Minimum wage. I support increasing minimum wage. I believe it should be increased because it has not kept pace with inflation. My opponent does not believe it should be increased. He stated in the Southern Illinois that it should be reduced by $1 an hour. He voted against minimum wage and then turned around and voted to increase his own taxpayer-funded salary by 10%. I support higher education. I've supported higher education by by sponsoring and voting for and getting passed a bill that caps student loan interest rates at half the amount they were formerly set at. My opponent, on the other hand, voted against a bill that would have provided a scholarship to community college graduates with a B+, with a B average or above who wanted to transfer to a four-year state university. Is that supporting education? I don't think so. Let's look at third-party value. Let's look at other folks. You don't have to listen to me. Why would the Farm Bureau endorse me if I didn't support agriculture and take care of the agriculture needs of our community? Why would the Alliance for Retired Americans endorse me for re-election? It's because of my support for Social Security and Medicare. Illinois Federation of Teachers, Illinois Education Association. I could go on. But let's talk a little bit about Mr. Bost. He was quoted last night as stating he wants to represent Southern Illinois to the best of his ability. What did he say then? He was going to figure out what that is when he gets to Washington. Now, is that somebody with a plan? Is that somebody with a clear direction? He says he wants America's on the wrong path.
And we're out of time.
Where is his direction? Where is his clear direction?
Thank you very much. We've come to the end of our final congressional debate of this election. We'd like to thank the candidates, Congressman Bill Enyart, Paula Bradshaw, and Representative Mike Bost. And you've been a terrific audience, I must say. We also want to thank our panelists tonight, Molly Parker of the Southern Illinoisan, Jennifer Fuller of WSIU Radio, and Beth Hunsdorfer of the hometown Belleville News Democrat. Thanks also to the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute at SIU Carbondale. The timers down here have done a wonderful job. Give these young men a big hand. And we also want to thank the staff of Lindenwood University here in Belleville. They've been terrific hosts. Thank you all for joining us. Good night from Belleville.
Thanks, Jack.
Hey, thank you, sir.